Good evening and welcome back to our special pre-election edition of At the Virtual Table. It's time for the Trump-Biden showdown. And it's time for what may be the most historic, pivotal election of our lifetimes. That's why we have lined up a stellar panel tonight to take you through the dance. But first, I want to offer you a pitch for how you can stay in the know in the run-up to the 2020 election and far beyond. You've got to get the Chicago Sun-Times. At the Sun-Times, we've amped up our digital offerings to bring all of it to you wherever you are. You can get the new Sun-Times e-paper. That's a daily digital replica of the print product that lives at paper.suntimes.com with a special digital offer that gives you unlimited access to both the e-paper and every digital story at suntimes.com for only, get this, $2.49 a month. Can't be beat. Learn more now and to subscribe at suntimes.com/subscribe. And you can also get our first-rate political coverage from the real sharp folks that you're going to be hearing from tonight, our political team, and our essential coronavirus coverage by subscribing to our podcast at the URLs on your screen. It's can't miss journalism. And now let's get to this can't miss panel. And I want to bring in my virtual table co-host, Sun-Times Washington Bureau Chief, Lynn Sweet. Hey, Lynn.
Laura, thank you for kicking off. And hello, everybody out there who's listening on our special pre-election edition with 5 days to go until Election Day. We have a big panel tonight, so let me just start off by introducing everybody. I feel it's a little bit like a Brady Bunch thing right now at the moment, so I don't know if you have to look around, but give a little wave when I introduce you. We have Dan Biss, the former state senator, Democratic candidate for governor. From the Chicago Sun-Times, our political experts, Rachel Hinton and Marlen Garcia. Illinois comptroller, Democrat Susana Mendoza. Doug Heye, Republican strategist. And Tim Schneider, the Republican Party of Illinois chairman. And we will be joined by one more person, I think, who's not here yet. But the great thing is, by having everybody in their square, we could kick it off. And no, this is not tic-tac-toe. This is a great political discussion. And I'm going to start with you, Doug Heye, who has a big overview on everything. We had Biden and Trump dueling it out in Florida today. Can you just summarize and tell us what's the state of the race right now with 5 days to go and early voting already underway?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, the early voting numbers that we're seeing are staggeringly high. We've all seen the footage of people in line voting and long lines of voting. And that's because there are a lot of people who are voting early. In my home state of North Carolina, where Trump was supposed to have an event tonight that got canceled because of weather, we've seen more than half of the eligible voters have already voted. This is numbers I don't think anybody really anticipated. Part of the reason that we see such long lines. If you're looking at all the polling, whether it's at the top of the ticket or as you go down to Senate races and House races, it's not a great scenario for Republicans. They're looking at losing the presidency. They're looking at potentially losing the Senate and losing seats in the House. And with that will inevitably come gubernatorial seats, some state legislatures as well, if it plays out as it looks like it will today. And why I think it will is ultimately, if you compare this to 2016, where Hillary Clinton kind of had a lead, people certainly thought she was going to win. What we didn't see were Democratic leads in the generic ballot. We didn't see Democratic leads in Senate and House down-ballot races. Every bit of news that I see for Republicans practically when I'm talking to folks working on campaigns or at party committees is that it's not going to be a great night for the GOP this Tuesday.
Well, I want to toss this now to Susana Mendoza. So also everybody, if you could see, if you want to show the t-shirt, it's the Joe Biden t-shirt and his aviator logo. Okay, so she's come in her swag. So you're a Democrat. Doug, Republican Doug strategist here just said it's not likely a good night for Trump. What are you most worried about when you look at some of the recent court hearings, maybe on counting the votes? What are you worried about heading into this final stretch?
Well, look, I think that we have a president who's made no qualms. He's every day, almost every minute, he's either tweeting or talking in a way that tries to discredit the current election process, right? He's trying to make it seem that it's illegitimate. He's making us think for the first time ever that we may not have a smooth transition. My every expectation is that he's going to lose on Tuesday. But let's assume that happens. We might have a president who refuses to leave, right? And so he's trying to make it seem as if no matter who votes for Joe Biden, this is an illegitimate election and it's fixed. And unless if he wins, America isn't going to be where it needs to be. So it's just so crazy that we're living through this right now as Americans. But that's where we're at. And, like yesterday, think about it, as a woman, right? I'm a Democrat, but I'm a woman. And just last night, he rolled out, of course, his most recent or most updated plan. His outreach plan for women is essentially saying that he's going to make sure our husbands get back to work. I mean, think about this, right? Like, what is it, 1950?
So do you have a structural political worry? If
You have a what?
a structural political worry, meaning, GOTV in the pandemic era, is there something when you look at this, what you hear from swing states or in getting out the vote, what do you think?
The biggest worry would be the efforts that the different states put in suppressing the vote, right? Because, I mean, number one, you had the president who was trying to undermine the U.S. Postal Service. You have a president who was didn't condemn all these fake ballot boxes that were being put and run by Republican GOP in different states. You have a president who tells people not to vote by mail unless if they're his supporters, but everyone else shouldn't trust the mail-in system. But more importantly, you have states, Republican states, who are doing everything they can to suppress the vote, especially of people of color who happen to vote more often than not for the Democratic ticket. So that's my biggest concern, is what is this president and the people that support him, what are they doing to try to limit access to the ballot box, whether it's through mail-in voting? You see the Supreme Court decision in Wisconsin was not a good one for people who are going to be disenfranchised of their vote, people who that shouldn't happen, but that's happening in Trump's America today. Thankfully, the most recent Supreme Court decisions will allow for votes to be counted after they roll in, legitimate votes in Pennsylvania and so forth. But that's my biggest concern, is that we have a president who might be utilizing the Supreme Court to try to fix this election for him. And that's a very real concern, and it's a very real threat that he's placed in our country.
So we have that out there. Tim Schneider, chairman of the Republican Party of Illinois. You don't have anything to worry about in Illinois. So I guess we can't, whatever happens there, no one's going to blame you. And every poll I see has Biden ahead, very healthy, always has been. But as a Republican who's looking at this whole scenario here, what is the last minute factor? Is it the pandemic? Or is it how Trump is talking about it? What is the factor? And is there any chance for a Trump turnaround now?
Well, thank you for all having me on. I can see that I'm in the minority in my viewpoints here, but I will tell you this, that I don't believe anybody is going to the polls to vote for Joe Biden or has voted for Joe Biden for being Joe Biden. People are voting at the polls to vote against Donald Trump. And then the other side, the more energetic side, is the side where we're having tens of thousands of people show up at rallies as opposed to people inside of little circles. And that really is because they can't get many people to come to those rallies. They couldn't even get enough people to come to a Biden rally when they had John Bon Jovi as the star. President Trump actually got more people to his rally. The energy is with the Republicans. I believe that with the amount of rallies that the president is holding here in the last 4 or 5 days, unfortunately, he had to cancel North Carolina, but he's already rebooked that event for Monday. And Joe Biden still is like a groundhog comes out of his basement when it seems like he only has to. He does these very small events. His vice presidential candidate is only doing virtual events today. I think we have the energy behind our president, Donald Trump. And if you look at, you don't look at the rhetoric sometimes, it and some of his tweets, but you look at what he's done for our country as far as trade deals, as far as our economy, as far as the unemployment is the best it's ever been for African Americans, for women, for Asians, for Latinos. If you look at the trade deals that he got us out of NAFTA and signed the USMCA.
Is that, given that, does that still matter as much now? Because all that happened pre-COVID, Tim, see, that's all been out there. I guess, what would be a turnaround though? If all that's been out there, is there something, if we were in play in Illinois, or if somebody in Wisconsin said, we need help, what's the turnaround message that you have?
The message is this: pre-COVID, President Trump's economy was off the charts. His foreign policy is off the charts. Even under COVID, we just saw the GDP rise 33.1% in the last quarter. Now, I know you're going to say, well, it was down the quarter before and it's just rebounded from that quarter, but this is astonishing that it has gotten back. The stock market was at 19 or 20,000. It's already back up even over the last few days. When it's dropped, it's over, I think it's near 27,000 points today.
Okay.
Can I jump in here, please? I totally don't want to be interrupting like a typical debate, but I do think, number one, I do want to say that I'm proud to vote for Joe Biden. So I'm not just voting anti-Trump. I'm proud to vote for Joe Biden. I believe that there are millions of Americans across this country who are going to proudly cast their vote, if they haven't already done so, for Joe Biden. He's an honorable man, he's a decent person, and he shows a level of empathy that I so miss from a president of the United States.
Okay, hold your thought there, Dan Biss.
He's been in office for 47 years and could not do what President Trump has done in 3.5 years in office.
We've
Yeah,
heard.
he's not killed.
Susana, hold on a minute. Everybody, hold on, time out. Dan Biss, I want to get you ready. Dan, you've seen this presidential campaign from the beginning and the primary when you're involved. So in this closing moment, you heard Tim Schneider, chairman of the Republican Party, summarized what Trump has been saying all along.
Yeah.
You're a Democrat, and if there aren't any persuadable people out there, I don't know what else you have to know that you don't know. What's the political answer right now? Is it you just talk about something else?
To the political answer to what? I mean, I actually think Tim, and you know, poor guy, he's got a tough hand he's been dealt and he's doing his best. But you know, he's really making our case for us. I'm not, and you know, Lynn, right? I didn't support Biden in the primary, but I am proud. I was proud to vote last week.
The earliest Elizabeth Warren supporter.
I was proud to do that, and I was very proud to vote for Joe Biden on Saturday. And it's not just because he's a decent person and Trump is, and it's not just because he's an honest person and Trump is, and it's not just because his policies are good and Trump's aren't. It's not even just because he's profoundly empathetic and Trump isn't. It's because we have a huge crisis going on right now in this country. And while Donald Trump's campaign is a demonstration every day about exactly what not to do, this is a super spreading campaign, almost as though he's trying his best to make his own supporters sick with these irresponsible, dangerous rallies as a global pandemic is spiking. Joe Biden, instead of doing the irresponsible, easy thing, is running a campaign showing what responsible leadership is, not just wearing a mask and social distancing, but modeling appropriate behavior that when he's president will lead us out of this pandemic. So how do you persuade undecided voters? They see two candidates in the middle of this crisis. One is modeling reckless, dangerous irresponsibility. One is modeling sane, reasonable, steady, science-based leadership. And that's why people are moving to Joe Biden. They're going to keep doing it until Tuesday.
Hold the thought. Now, Doug, real pithy, because then I'm going to toss it to Laura. Is this a referendum on the pandemic? You've heard now from the various voices here. What do you think?
Oh, sure. The pandemic and all of its ramifications. If we go back to February, most conversations that I had with Democrats were, I can't believe we're going to lose to this guy because a president and a strong economy just doesn't lose. That's obviously been turned on its head now. And, you know, we got good economic news today. And, you know, I think the frustrating thing so often with Trump is whenever we get good economic news, say pre-COVID jobs numbers would come out the first Friday of the month, we would know by 8:30 when those numbers come out that we're not going to spend a lot of time focusing on them because Trump has tweeted an insult, Trump has attacked a journalist, Trump has done something to get in the way of good news that he could be touting. He's got one last opportunity to make the case on the economy. We'll see if he does so.
Okay, hold that thought. We'll get back to the presidential politics and the big panel. We can mix it up later. Laura, back to you.
Thank you, Lynn. And actually, I want to ask another question, a follow-up question of our Sun-Times experts on presidential politics and its impact down ballot. We've got Rachel Hinton with us, our star political reporter, and Marlen Garcia, who's been on our editorial board and is now a newsroom leader. And I want to start with you, Rachel. I know you've been covering the Cook County State's Attorney race, one of the hottest races certainly in the Chicago area right now. What do you see, if any, impact the presidential race has on that particular race, and how do you see that race? What's your view on the state of that race right now?
Well, Kim Foxx has tried to paint her Republican opponent, Pat O'Brien, as Cook County's own version of President Donald Trump. She said that he's resorted to Trump-like fear-mongering and name-calling and whatnot. Having sat in editorial board discussions with both of them, I don't think that he's really resorted to any name-calling that doesn't seem like a candidate being a candidate in a tight race. He's blamed her for being inept. He's blamed her for the violence that we're seeing, the spike in homicides. He blamed her for a poor response to the looting that we saw over the summer. I think that those are fair complaints or fair things to target her on. She has come back and said that he's like Trump. He is toting a law and order. There's a law and order theme to his campaign, which I think is a signal to Democrats that, hey, this person doesn't believe in the criminal justice reforms that she's worked on, and that others within the county and beyond have worked on too. I think beyond that, though, I don't see very much of the other than the rhetoric being similar in terms of law and order, both at the national level. We heard Trump talk about that. We heard it all throughout the Republican National Convention. I don't think that there's real similarities between the two of them, meaning Trump and Biden versus Fox and O'Brien beyond law and order. I think, there's a big question about whether or not we'll know who wins on election night. I think this is a race where we will more than likely know. I do think that mail-in ballots that are still going to be trickling in, I think until for 2 weeks after, will definitely probably play a role in whether or not leads change and by how much. But I think we'll have a pretty clear idea of who's won. I do think it'll be tight. I do think that, as we've watched over the past few weeks, Pat O'Brien is now, he was outraising, I believe, Kim Foxx last quarter. And she brought out past endorsements yesterday, and Senator Kamala Harris is doing a robocall for her, targeting some Cook County voters. So I think that that's a sign to me that maybe she thinks she's in trouble. Her campaign, of course, would tell you otherwise. But yeah, those are some of the main. And
she also would not. She also refused to debate with O'Brien in the last couple of debates that were on the calendar. And do you think that's another sign? What is that? What was that about? Because I wrote a column criticizing her for that, because I felt as the incumbent and the front runner and as someone who's run as a reformer that was the wrong move. Has that had any impact on the race, you think?
Someone I spoke to, a pollster, said, if she wasn't concerned, she would debate him. And I think people feel similarly. If she, had nothing to hide, if she wasn't worried, I think she would take every debate opportunity that she could, especially now that the playing field is kind of equal in terms of money and endorsements or donors. Maybe not endorsements, but donors especially. Oftentimes incumbents especially don't want to give their opponent free airtime to criticize them and their record. But I think people know more or less what Kim Foxx is going to be hit on. She's going to be hit on Justice Smollett. She's going to be hit on crime and the fact that people really believe that, her policies or policies that she's championed or advocated for are the reason behind spikes in violence. And so I think without really getting a sense of the two candidates and seeing them go head to head, I think some people are going to be maybe left out of really knowing for sure who they would have voted for, but I think most people's minds are made up right now.
Thanks. That's a really sharp overview. And I'm glad to hear that maybe there's going to be at least one race we're going to know the results of that night. That's nice to know. Marlen, I wanted to hear from you about if there's a particular race that you're watching and if there's any connection between the top of the ticket and some of these down ballot races.
Certainly, I think there is a connection in these suburban congressional races that I'm watching closely. For instance, in the 6th congressional district, you have the incumbent Democrat Sean Casten up against Jean Ives. Jean Ives primaried Governor Rauner 2 years ago and gave him a really close race. That's a DuPage County Northwest suburban race. Actually, it cuts across several counties. So we'll see what Trump Biden, what the cause and effect is there on that race. You have another Democrat, Lauren Underwood, out in the far suburbs. She took out a Republican 2 years ago, and now she's in a tight race with Jim Oberweis. He's a state senator. A lot of people know the Oberweis name, right? They make very good ice cream. And so those are congressional races that I'll be watching very closely on election night as Republicans try to, retake those seats.
Another big thing on the ballot is the fair tax initiative, which it seems like if there's a commercial that you don't need to see anymore, it's the fair tax commercials. They've been inundating the airwaves for weeks, if not months. So I think both of you, Marlen and Rachel, what is your take on? And this is actually a question that came from the audience. Clem Balanoff, who everybody knows is a very prominent political operator around town. He asked for your predictions on the fair tax, whether it'll pass and why. Marlen?
Well, I think it's going to pass. I think it's going to be close, but I think it's going to pass. Everything I'm seeing says it might take a week or two, for those results to come through. And I think I told you, you and Lynn about a month ago that if it doesn't pass, J.B. Pritzker can blame Michael Madigan and his years of hold on Illinois. But I think it will pass.
And that is because why is they can blame Mike Madigan, Mr. Powerhouse in Springfield? Why?
Oh, I think that those who oppose, and we call it the fair tax. It's I don't know. It's possibly a fairer tax, but I don't know that I buy into fair tax. It's a proposal for a graduated income tax, right? And I think that people who are opposing it, point to corruption in Illinois. You can't trust these people with a constitutional amendment. You can't trust Michael Madigan and his army, his machine. They're not going to do what's in your best interests. And he's got the ComEd scandal hanging over him. So that doesn't bode well, but I still think there's enough working class, middle class people who see that they are likely to benefit. If you're middle class and your taxes are going to go up, well, they're going to go up later now with this proposal, right? You won't get hit as soon as you would otherwise, because taxes are going up in Illinois. Right. That's the truth.
Rachel, what's your take on the fair tax? Do you think it's are you as optimistic about it as she is?
I'm not. I don't know that I'm willing to say it'll go one way or the other. I think it'll be really tight. And I think we won't know until weeks after the election, once all those ballots are counted.
Could I jump in here? Since we have the ability of a visual medium, Doug, you don't live in Illinois, so you probably don't know anything about what we're talking about. So just if you could raise your hand, Dan and Susana and Tim, do you think up or down? Is this thing going to pass? Okay, that's a no from the Republican chair. Biss doesn't know.
I have no idea. I'm hoping it does. Can I just say, as the controller for the state of Illinois, the person who has to actually pay the state's bills, and I see what the money is, what's coming in and what's not coming in. It's important that people understand when they're voting for this, that I don't care how much they distrust politicians. I don't care how much they hate them, frankly. They should trust their own wallets. And if you make less than $250,000 a year, you can vote for the graduated income tax or the fair tax amendment, because you will see your taxes go down. Not a lot, but they're not going to be going up. On the other hand, if you make more than $250,000 and you don't want to pay more, those are the people that are trying to get you to tap into your distrust and your hatred towards politicians and vote against your own interests. So please don't let them win, because you lose at the end of the day if this does not pass. We still need money. The debt
This is the same legislature that said when we raised the tax from 3% to 5%, we were going to pay down the state's bills. They didn't pay down the state bills. They did not pay down the state bills. You still have $7 to $9 million in unpaid bills. And this tax is going to go down in flames because everybody's beginning to know what it is. It's a middle class tax increase that allows the legislature to not only raise taxes on anybody more easily after it's passed, but especially retirement income. This is even your own state treasurer said that this tax will allow the legislature to more easily raise raise tax on retirement income.
Tim, you're just lying.
Let's do a very
no, this is the truth.
No, it's an explicit lie. It should not be permitted to stand. It is a lie.
Okay? I don't lie, and that's not a lie. It's just you're just hurt by it because it's the truth.
Tim, let Dan respond. Dan.
No, I mean, so, and again, Tim's been dealt a really rough hand, and I feel for him. It's tough to argue against.
Don't feel for me. Don't feel for me.
I do.
Please,
but
please,
it's tough to argue against
because I feel for you when this thing goes down.
It's tough to argue against a proposal that would give a tax break to 97% of Illinois households. If you're making, just like Susana said, if you're making under $250,000 a year, this puts money in your pocket. And so what the opponents want to say is that it raises tax on the middle class. It doesn't. What they want to say is that it raises retirement taxes. It does not do that. And then they want to say, okay, fine. It doesn't do that yet, but it lets the politicians do that some other time. You know what the politicians could do today if they wanted to? They could raise middle class taxes and they could tax retirement income. The reason they don't do that isn't because they can't. It's because they don't want to, and they still won't want to after this passes.
Let me clarify something.
Let me clarify something. First of all, I'm not a liar, first of all, and I'm going to let the voters decide on Tuesday who's telling the truth and who is not.
No, I think
that's not how truth works.
That voters fall for all of the lies that are being told about what this tax does or does not do. It does not tax retirement income. They have the power to do it today, as Dan said. They don't do it. It is going to give 97% of Illinoisans a tax cut. Again, not huge, but it's less money versus having to pay more. Those are the facts. And there's, a lot of money being put in trying to lie to people flat out. The AARP are supporting the Fair Tax Amendment because they know with certainty that it will do nothing to tax retirement income. So, I hate to sound mean, Tim, but it is a flat out lie. And this is what we see, and it's been normalized in Trump's America. Unfortunately,
okay.
I don't feel for people, but I definitely feel for the 97% of people who could potentially have to pay a higher tax because they're being duped by the millionaires and billionaires who are spreading false information about what this does.
So,
once again, it's your spin on a situation that's going to increase taxes on the middle class and tax retirement income down the road. We'll see what happens, and we'll play this back in 2 or 3 years. And I tell you, I will be correct.
Okay, Laura.
Can I jump in for a second? We've met the editorial board. I've been meeting with candidates as part of the editorial board for 4 or 5 years now. There is no political appetite to tax on for either party to tax retirement income. No political will. I don't see it happening.
No matter, the politicians would know it's a third rail. They're not going to go through it. I wanted to move on, Lynn, and maybe go back a little bit to presidential politics. We have some great questions from the audience, and I wanted to go back to Doug because our friend David Resnick, who comes to a lot of our events, has a great one. He asks, "You're predicting, Doug, it's likely that Trump will not pull this out. If Trump loses, will he remain the titular leader of the Republican Party? And if not, who will be?"
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and the short answer is I don't think we know, and there are a lot of reasons for that. I'll try not to talk too long, but one, you're going to have a Congress potentially want to move on. That may mean whether or not they're going to determine who the next minority leader is going to be. If Republicans lose, 8 seats or 10 seats, there may be a move to push Kevin McCarthy out. Okay, well, who then replaces Kevin? Who would be the next Republican National Committee chair? What does the RNC look like after this? And then we're going to have, potentially 10, 12, 15 people running for president, all of whom are going to run in different ways from each other. And we will see some attacks, I think, on each other, friendly fire of who was the most loyal to Trump. But some will say, you know what, this wasn't the best way to move forward. This wasn't the best thing for the party to do. We should have done it this way. And, it's going to have to fight itself out both in DC and then in the States.
Wow,
I think we do know that Donald Trump will not go quietly for a long time.
That's for sure.
Tim, what do you think is the scenario if Trump does lose? What do you think happens to the National Party? And what are you thinking about? And what do you hear?
Well, I think Doug is likely correct. First of all, I truly do not believe that Donald Trump will lose on Tuesday, though I understand the consensus of opinion in this group, but I don't believe he's going to lose. I believe the energy, the enthusiasm is going to take him over the threshold. You've seen that the numbers, the polls are coming much, much closer than they were 2 weeks ago. The momentum is towards the president. But again, Doug is right. I'm not sure what is going to happen if the president should lose. It's not a scenario I have looked at. Will Trump begin to lead another group of people outside the Republican Party, or will he be encompassed within the Republican Party? I'm not sure what would happen in that case. When it comes to congressional races, Marlen, I think you did a good job, but we got to look at Esther King out in the western part of Illinois. I don't know if you've got her on your radar though, but we're trying to put together an event in eastern Iowa for Joni Ernst and for Esther King in eastern Iowa, because that is a very close race against Sherry Bustos as well. So we're looking at the 6th, the 14th, and also the 17th. I thought I'd mention that as well.
That's a great point. Bustos is in Trump country out there.
Right, and here's the other thing for our listeners to know, and Sherry is would be a big coup for the Republicans because she's the chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which is the House Democratic political operation. And so if she does not survive a re-election bid, that would be, I think, a big morale boost for the party, not whether or not Trump wins or not. But I want to throw this out for the whole panel here. Hunter Biden, a factor in the closing campaign days or not? Who wants to take that on?
I'll take that one.
Can I start with that one?
Okay, Dan, then Tim.
Yeah, I'll say it's not a factor, partially because the story is so thin and there's so little there, but partially because even if you take the dishonest, inaccurate kind of Fox News spin on this Hunter Biden story, guess which candidate is more corruption in his family? Guess which candidate is stealing millions of dollars from the US Treasury by embedding his family in his multinational business interests? It's Donald Trump. And so the idea that they could make up this weird house of cards, halfway fabricated thing that doesn't quite make sense, and still, even if you give it the most generous possible spin, makes Joe Biden look like a choir boy compared to Donald Trump. I just don't see how that's going to convince anybody to vote for Donald Trump.
Now, Tim has something to say, I know.
Tim.
Okay, well, Biden Incorporated, led by Hunter Biden and his father, Joe Biden, have been profiting off of foreign governments for years. And it has been proven now through this gentleman, Bobulinski, who is, you know, when the Democrats actually took the story of Anonymous, the person Anonymous, and ran with it in 2018, they don't even want to decide whether Bobulinski's comments are factual or not. Hunter Biden has been making deals with Russia and the Chinese government for several years that are benefiting himself, his uncle Jim, and also the big guy, which is been proven to be 10% going to Joe Biden. Now you can smile and you can laugh all you
No,
want.
it's not a question of smiling, Tim. It's a question of you're saying these allegations have been proven, and
No,
I think
you
we're
know what?
we're
Okay,
far away from proving them at this
So
point.
any of you people that are on this call that are journalists, you can win the Pulitzer Prize today if you can prove that Tony Bobulinski and all this is not true. The laptop is in the hands. The laptop is in the hands of the Senate committee and the FBI. The emails have been proven to be correct.
No, Tim, I so want to give you time to talk here, but we can't. See, Hunter Biden is fair play. He has had jobs that it does appear he has leveraged his Biden name. But the stuff
Clearly.
you're talking about, okay, is stuff that, believe me, if reporters could have proven this and they had this on it. Now, for our audience, the name, and I don't even know how to say it right, Bublinsky, I might be massacring it. Okay, he just kind of popped out of the blue onto the debate night. And when you say this is a laptop that also fell into the hands, what a small world, of Rudy Giuliani, and he shopped it around to make sure he got it out. So this didn't kind of go through any regular investigative order. And while it is true, I'm not walking away from it, that Hunter Biden does seem to have used his father's connection throughout his life to get jobs. That's far different than what we could say right now is proven, because we went through all of impeachment with Hunter Biden and Burisma out there and nothing was proven. But that aside, with 5 and almost now 4.5 days left, just give me the political assessment of whether or not things are going to hurt. Because Tim, the way you said it is for people who hear it, who watch Fox News and AN and get their news through Breitbart and other places.
Okay,
So
Susana wants to jump in here.
Let me answer your question in a political way. If the mainstream media picks up on this story and actually reports on it, it will affect the election. If it just stays with Republican news and is not expanded beyond that, and nobody grabs onto it and tries to run with it and try to find out if it's factual or not, it will be meaningless.
Okay, Susana and Dan, what do you think? And then Doug.
Your question was, is this going to factor? I don't think it's going to factor at all. I think it's a non-factor. We don't even know if they're like, what are the facts of the facts of the facts? No one knows anything. It's a big conspiracy theory. And at the end of the day, there's only one person running for president who's actually paid more taxes to China than he has in his own country, and that's Donald Trump. And I think that's what Americans care about. They care about the wealth that his own family has made serving taxpayers, if you want to call it that. And we have as we started this whole conversation, I think this election is going to come down to how Donald Trump is managing the country in every aspect. But number one, the coronavirus, and every day it's getting worse. And our economy can never get better until we get a handle on this virus. And he is certainly not the person to do it, being that he thinks it's, essentially a non-factor, right? People should just get over it. People should get over that we've lost 228,000 people whose families are still mourning and are going to have a very dark and a very painful holiday season. That's what's on the ballot on Tuesday. Okay. It's what people have been voting either for or against when it comes to President Trump.
Okay, Dan, you wanted to jump in?
Tim said that if the mainstream media reported on this Hunter Biden story more, it would affect the election. I think he could be right. It might help Joe Biden if the mainstream media actually reported on this non-story and pointed out that this kind of absurd set of fantasies that have consumed the Trump campaign in the waning days of a campaign while we're in a massive, massive economic collapse and a terrible pandemic when we've lost nearly 250,000 lives. If Americans saw that this nothing made up fantasy is what's occupying their president's mind, it might move even more people toward Joe Biden. But as it is, I think it's going to be a non-issue.
Okay, I'd like to come back. We've got, like I said, we've got a lot of great questions here. I'd like to come back to Doug with a question from, and others can jump in as well, from Amy Campbell, who asks, can Biden or Trump lose Florida on election night, or whenever we decide it? Can either one of them lose Florida and still win? And what is the demographic turnout that you're going to be watching most closely?
Sure. I think Florida is more important for Trump than it is for Biden. Just if you look at how the map has been expanding for Biden and contracting for Trump, Trump's having to go to places that he shouldn't have to go to. Biden's going to places where it's a real opportunity for him to go to. It's very different for Joe Biden to go to Georgia, say, than Donald Trump going to Georgia, which he's going to go back to, I believe, on Sunday night. One is playing offense, one is playing defense. You'd rather play offense than defense. The key demographic that I'm going to be looking at in swing states is, for me, African-American turnout. And a big reason for that is just my bias of being from North Carolina. In 2008, the African-American turnout is what really got Obama over the finish line in North Carolina. In North Carolina, 2008 and 2012, it was the second closest state in the nation. Trump won it by 3.5 points in 16, which was a wider margin than Romney or Obama, but not a wide margin. If the Biden campaign is able to really ratchet up African-American turnout in that state, in Pennsylvania, in and around Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, for instance, that's what's going to be, I think, his biggest boon. And again, I'll stop talking about North Carolina eventually, but that state has 11 historically Black colleges and universities. Those were turnout machines for Obama. If they can play that same role for Joe Biden with African-American voters, and obviously if you're talking about colleges and universities, young voters, that may be the difference in that state for him.
Is there an issue though with colleges and universities in terms of the fact that the campuses are very empty because of the virus? Is it going to be more of a challenge to organize students and get them out if a lot of them are not even there, if they're back at home and working virtually?
Yeah, that's a real challenge and obviously not just for HBCUs, but for any colleges that have been traditionally really strong at pumping out voters for Democrats. Now they're scattered, whether it's within that state or, they just haven't gone to that state because they're back home, wherever that may be. That's a real challenge for turnout for Democrats.
So what do you think the impact is? And let's maybe just to go around real quickly on the panel of Barack Obama. Obama is finally in person on the campaign trail, and he has been not shy about taking on Trump. He kept silent a few years. So why don't we do a kind of go a spin around the bend here and do Tim, Marlen, Susana, Rachel, Dan, and Doug, the impact of Barack Obama back in the game. Kind of like Tony La Russa going back to the White House.
Tim?
I think I think President Obama should have been out there much sooner for Joe Biden. I think he's been reluctant to get on the campaign trail for him. I don't know why, whether his support is 100% for him or not. I really don't know. We as Republicans are very surprised that Barack Obama had not been out on the campaign trail months ago for Joe Biden. And when you're looking at the African-American vote here in this election, and you see what Joe Biden did in 1994 and hurt African-Americans with a crime bill, and then you see what Donald Trump has done with historically Black colleges and universities, and where they used to have to go to the White House and the administration every year for funding. This president has provided funding for HBCUs this year and on into future years, as well as created the lowest unemployment for African Americans in history. And I think he's done a great deal. You see a lot of prominent African Americans coming out for President Trump and what he's done with the First Step Act. Nobody in this group can tell me that the First Step Act hasn't been monumental in helping African Americans. It's been a great policy change, and I think the president is not worried at all about African American turnout. I believe you're going to see in this election historically good numbers for the president with African Americans.
Marlen.
Thank you, Marlen.
Here's what some pollsters have told me, that in states like Georgia, North Carolina, that people of color have figured out that what Donald Trump is doing is trying to pit one race against another. And he's trying to divide, and he's trying to conquer through division. And I have so much respect for Tim Schneider. We endorsed him 2 years ago, the Sun-Times editorial board, when he was running for re-election for commissioner. But I'm so curious what the Republicans are going to do, because here's what happened. My mom is from Mexico and she has brown skin. She's been insulted. She's been told she should go back to Mexico. And she's a naturalized American citizen, by the way. So you want to talk about bringing out the vote? Latinos don't live in a vacuum, right? But moderates, and I've been a moderate, I have voted for plenty of Republicans, but how they're going to get somebody like me back after what they've done to my family and people I care and care about deeply, that's going to be really interesting. But I will agree with Tim on one thing. I'm surprised that former President Barack Obama didn't come out sooner. I really respect him as a president, but he does have like an aloof side, right? We're almost like he wants to be above this. And I think he should have been out sooner, but it's a very good thing for Joe Biden to have him out now.
Who else wants to weigh in on the Obama factor?
Susana. Look, I think it's great that President Obama is out there, but I personally, it's good, but Joe Biden is his own man. Joe Biden is going to win on Tuesday. And of course, I think from like a feel good, we all, a lot of us love President Obama, and that's my crazy bird. Anti-Trump, I'm just saying it for the record. But I think it's wonderful to have the president out there. What I like that President Obama is doing right now is he's speaking truth to power. He's taking the gloves off. He's speaking about the truth of Donald Trump in a way that resonates with Americans. And he didn't have to tell us this. I'm glad he's saying it, because usually, when they go low, he goes high. But I'm glad that he's just going right at him right now. And that's a good thing. But even had he not come out, I believe that Joe Biden was going to win this presidency on his own. And I believe that Joe Biden is going to be America's president. I'm excited about that. But I do think it would have been great if he came out sooner. I don't think it was necessary even that he come out. I'm glad he did. Better late than never. But again, this is Joe Biden's, that he's going to win, and he's going to have done it on his own, and with an amazing VP candidate who I think really is long overdue to have a Black woman on the vice presidential ticket. And someday, hopefully, we'll have a Black woman president in this country as well.
Your bird seems to like what you're saying.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah. I would just say two quick things. First of all, one of Donald Trump's kind of peculiar mental impairments is around he can't get Barack Obama out of his head. If Barack Obama did it, it must be bad. If Barack Obama didn't do it, it must be good. If Barack Obama said the sky is blue, the sky must be green. And so he easily gets goaded into picking fights with President Obama. And now with President Obama on the trail, that contrast is all the more there. And of course, he's a very, very popular political figure now with a very broad swath of the American public. And so I think that only redounds to Joe Biden's benefit. I also think the contrast is very, very clear that you have a recent Republican president, George W. Bush, who is conspicuously not out there on the trail, who is conspicuously not supporting Donald Trump. George W. Bush is not somebody who I agreed with about anything on policy, but he seems to have some respect for some basic sense of decorum and personal conduct that makes it impossible for him to be for Donald Trump. And I think people are seeing that.
I would like to jump in here with another question from the audience, and this is one of those things that comes up every time we have a political conversation, and that's about the polls. Debbie Savage asks, how much should we be relying on the polls? How much should we believe these polls? And is there any particular poll that is more reliable or that you trust more than others? I think I want to go to Rachel first on this, because I know, Rachel, you look at this stuff all day long as a political reporter. How much stock do you put in the polls in terms of assessing the candidates that you're covering and where things are in the race?
I think I'm still recovering from 2016, so I don't trust polls completely. I think that they're good guideposts, but I don't think they tell you everything that's going on, especially in battleground states or districts or precincts that are close or maybe have flipped previously or in recent memory. But I also just like talking to pollsters because more often than not, they have their ear to the ground. They kind of know what's going on. They're talking to more people or people who are further aligned with the right or the left than I am. And I think that those people often give a good sense of things that I may have missed in a state or in an area, in a ward. So.
Or you have a point. One of the things that everyone worries about in the world of polling is how do you make sure that 2020 isn't a replay of 2016? And there are some technical differences, and in a sense, the stable and amount of the lead that Biden has is a factor. Doug, do you see the polls as predictive, even with some of the polling improvements that the pollsters tried to make?
Yeah, well, they've tried to make improvements and it's gotten harder at the same time. Polling is traditionally done on landline, and less people have landlines. And, a lot of people, if a phone number rings on their cell and they don't recognize the number, they don't pick it up. And so polling has gotten harder. It's harder today than it was 2 years ago. So if you see a poll, it may tell you what today is like, but it doesn't tell you what yesterday or tomorrow is going to be like. So it's hard to pick up trends, which is why looking at as much data as you can is really the best way to see where things are going. And again, every bit of polling that I see suggests that it's really bad news for Republicans on election night. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine who's consulting on a race in Texas says, our race is okay. It's not great. It's okay. But wow, these presidential numbers are tighter than anything we thought we'd see in Texas.
Right.
We're
So
talking
Tim,
about Texas.
sorry.
That's not great news for Republicans.
So Tim, tomorrow night in Milwaukee, Joe Biden's coming there, and we only have a few campaign days left. Given how close Wisconsin is, its politics are so different from Illinois, how would you read the tea leaves and having Biden come in on Friday night in Milwaukee, given given the court ruling that ballot counting time will be limited? What's your tea leaf reading of that stuff?
I think that Wisconsin is going to be very, very close. We see the president going to Green Bay over the weekend as well. Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota are going to be very close. If he doesn't win Florida, basically the race will be over. So he has to win Florida. He doesn't absolutely have to win Pennsylvania, but he needs to win Pennsylvania to offset any losses in the Midwest. I think that Joe Biden needs to come to Wisconsin if he thinks he can win it, because it is close right now. I'm going to agree with you on that. But the president's coming back to Wisconsin as well, and it's going to be a tight one there.
On it. So when we look at presidential politics as it spills over in Illinois, I just want to go back to our big congressional races for a moment. Does anyone think, and I've talked to, the Kasten, Ives, Underwood, and Oberweis campaigns. I think Trump will be a factor in that it may spur turnout in the suburbs. Dan, you live in a suburb. Do you think Trump is a factor in turning out more Republicans or more Democrats?
Well, probably both, but especially Democrats. I think that, the numbers that we're seeing, not just in my, deep blue, far left suburb of progressives like me in Evanston, but across the suburbs, well into Lake and DuPage and Will and even Kane counties and similar places around the country, is that Trump's numbers are absolutely terrible. And, quite frankly, I remember in 2011 when we drew the congressional maps, those two districts, the ones represented by Sean Casten and Lauren Underwood, were expected to be safe Republican districts. Now they're held by two Democratic incumbents who I think are both considered favorites to win their re-elections. It's a sign of how much Trump has really changed the political map.
On it. So go on, Tim.
And if I could just say that as we speak right now, Donald Trump is holding a telephone town hall with Jim Oberweis in the 14th district. So we believe that Donald Trump will help him immensely in that district. And that was drawn as a Republican district. We should not have lost that in 2018, but we did. We're hoping to regain that district. The 6th district has suburban women have moved away from Donald Trump. It's going to be more difficult for Jeannie to win that district. But she's been working it really, both these campaigns have been working it very, very hard. And once again, Esther out in the 17th. And I think we've secured Rodney Davis down in the 13th district, which was a toss up, but now he's up by quite a few points and they've spent an awful lot of money there as well.
On it. So when you look at the big, robust picture, Doug, of this campaign, do you see any last minute issue that could change the dynamics? The pandemic we know is spiking. We have had multiple surprises in October. Is it a hurricane now that could change something? Is there something you see that will just, for those people who have not voted yet, change something?
No, and look, the universe of undecided voters is tinier than we ever would have imagined it to be. There just aren't a lot of undecided voters out there. Again, anecdotally, I had a reporter from the Washington Post call me a couple of weeks ago and wanted to report about undecided voters in North Carolina. And I said, I didn't know any, but let me call a few friends. And I reached out to a friend in Chapel Hill, a friend in Charlotte, and a friend in Winston-Salem, and all three laughed at me because they didn't know any undecided voters. So it's very hard then to really persuade anybody if they're not there to be persuaded. But ultimately, if you look at polling consistently, the best message, even with the difficult place that the economy is right now, the best place for Donald Trump to be is to be talking about the economy. So when he's talking about Barack Obama, or he's talking about Hunter Biden, or anything else that isn't the economy and the good economic news that we got today, he's not helping himself. He should be talking about this and nothing else over the coming days.
And by the way, you know who's not on the campaign trail? Is Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
And she had created 2 years ago, Get Out the Vote organization. And my analysis 2 years ago was she didn't want to get involved in anything partisan because her book turned out to be a blockbuster, came out the week after the election. She would be an incredible asset if she wanted to go out and do campaigning, and she has not. Her absence has been noted among Democrats.
Right. Well, I think that reflects her distaste for politics. I know earlier on in the campaign, during the primaries, there was all this talk about, we just need to get Michelle out there. She could sweep the floor with everyone. And Michelle Obama is probably the last Democrat on the planet that would want to run for president or be deeply involved in politics. So it doesn't really surprise me. Lynn, I think we need to wrap, and I have a couple just quickie questions that I think it would be great to go out on. And one is, I just need a hand raise on whether or not you think we're going to know the outcome of the presidential race by the morning of November 4th, the day after the election. How many of you think we're going to know the outcome by then?
Can I do this? I think we'll know early how long, if it's going to go long.
We'll know early if it's going to go long?
Yeah.
Okay. And Tim, Marlen, you think we're going to know? Dan? Oh, okay.
That was an optimistic hand raise. I'm not going to lie to you.
Well, I'll take it. We need to be optimistic.
Trying to will it into existence.
And then last question. Have you voted yet? And if so, how and when? And I'll start with me. I voted a couple of weeks ago in person. There was no line. I was lucky because I was smart enough to go during the Bears game. So everybody was watching the Bears game and I snuck in there. Marlen.
I've not voted yet. I do hope to vote early.
Okay. Tim?
I voted by mail. My ballot's been sent in about a week ago.
Doug?
I'm voting tomorrow at Nationals Park because I haven't been in a ballpark for over a year and I really want to go to a ballpark.
That's one way to get in there. Dan?
I voted early in person this past Saturday at the Civic Center in Evanston.
Rachel?
I voted early. I dropped off my ballot a couple days ago.
Yeah, not too many people trusting that mail, it looks like. Susana?
Yeah, I voted early, but I voted with my absentee ballot, as did my 85-year-old mother and my husband. And we took it to the polling place and put it in the secure box.
That must have been fun for you to be with her.
We voted, all three of us provided. Woohoo!
What a shocker. Lynn?
Well, I vote in Washington, D.C., and they do send out ballots where you don't have to ask for them, which coming from Illinois is always a little bit of a shock that you don't make a request, an application for a ballot. I am going to tomorrow go to the box near my library in Washington and put it in, because it's there, it's easy, convenient. No one trusts the mail that I know. And anyway, now it's too late. Anyway, that was a really good way to end up on how we're all voting, because there are so many ways on it. So I want to thank our panel, Dan Biss, Marlen Garcia, Doug Heye, Tim Schneider, Susana Mendoza, and Rachel Hinton. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a lively conversation, and we appreciate your bearing with us, because this is a little bit of a different format, but we hope we just covered a lot of territory in a short time. But now, Laura gives the opening pitch to sell the Sun-Times, and I'm going to be your closer. So now that I've thanked you, I want to tell you about our offer to get this paper into your email box or onto your, if you want it in paper, we'll get it to you either way. So we have a bunch of digital offerings we could bring you. You could get the new Sun-Times e-paper, which I love because it looks like the real thing. It's a daily replica of the print product, and it lives at paper.suntimes.com. Now, we could give you a special offer for our viewers. You could get the e-paper and every story on it for only $2.49 a month. And you see on this screen, do a screen grab if you think you're not going to remember it, suntimes.com/subscribe. Well, we've come to the end of this edition of At the Virtual Table. We thank everyone for joining us. We're going to give a little, just everybody go out and vote if you haven't. And we'll see you at this very same place next time. Everyone,
Happy elections. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
take care.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Yeah.